Hello, can you hear me? Alrighty, y'all. So, just a little backstory on this video. Let's just start with an intro. Keep it basic here. So, hope everyone is having a wonderful day. By the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about the Megabass Vision 110 hooks and why I like them. It's my opinion, right? And we're going to talk about a couple other options for you to try out if you do find yourself losing fish on a 110. Now, a little backstory on why I'm doing this video. Now, I do want to preface, I'm not trying to put out negativity out in the world. That's not what I'm about. We do have a little bit of a YouTube troller in a way. I think he means well, except the way he says some of his statements are very, very opinionated. And I'm trying to help him really just understand our point of view from a tackle shop. Obviously, we can't carry everything. His opinions are based around a bunch of either absolutes or total assumptions. So I've posted this guy on our social media before, on our Instagram, Facebook stories, and a lot of people are not vibing with what he has to say either. So that's just part of the reason I'm putting it out there. We've gone back and forth on YouTube comments several times. It takes up a lot of my day to respond to these comments, but I try to respond to them in the nicest way possible. I have never said anything bad about him straight up. I have called him out for his just wildly over the top opinions, which I think someone is going to have to give this guy a reality check, because that's just the nature of it. My opinions are based around my experiences, other people's experiences. I know, obviously, my opinions are my own. I don't claim to know all the facts. I don't claim to be the best. And that's kind of how this guy is coming at me. He's just coming at me really, really hard. He's like an X-Men. His name's Wolverine on YouTube. I'm sure you can go look up the comments. But again, the main purpose of this video is to show you the 110, how I like to fish it, what I like to set it up on, and kind of some other options to throw on as hooks for your 110. And just, I know he watches these videos. He loves watching them and commenting and stuff. And he was actually one of our first main commenters back when we first started posting regularly, which I shout out to him. You're a good, engaged, I don't know, customer, but, good, engaged person on social media. So here's my main thinking, right? So his main argument for not liking the Vision 110 hook, right, is that he claims it is trash. That's his opinion. Totally fine. I get that. I absolutely love the Vision 110 hook. It's got an out barb on it. The cat's wedge hooks straight out of the package. I absolutely love these hooks right here. My opinion. I don't lose a lot of actually, my hook to land ratio on these stock hooks right here is just above 95-96%. The only time I really pull them off is if the jerkbait gets stuck in a tree, the fish just rips them out. And it's very, very rare, even here in Texas where I live, where there are stumps, where there are just random balls of big ol' thick monofilament braided line. You have docks, you have like I said, stumps, any other submerged cover and stuff like that. I have a huge opportunity, probably more than most people, especially if you're in a very deep, clear reservoir where you're not going to get hung on anything, right? So I have almost, let's not say disadvantage, but let's say I have more of a chance to break off fish, have them pull off, get me wrapped in something, and I still choose the Megabass 110 Katsuage hooks over just about any other hook on the market. I absolutely love the out barb hooks. I think they provide a lot of, I guess let's just call it strengths. We'll just call them strengths. So some of the main strengths I see in the Katsuage out barb hooks, and I got the whiteboard behind me so you guys can kind of follow along my thinking, right? I'll use blue. It's going to show up a little bit better on the whiteboard. So let's, we've got the normal Katsuage hook. You got the hook shank. It's a medium shank. It's not like a short shank or anything. It's just gonna be a medium shank going down. Try to get that line thicker for y'all. And then it's going to be almost a V shape. It's gonna kick out a little bit, and then it's going to kick up like this. And the barb is gonna be on the outside just like that. And it's gonna be, as you know, a treble hook. It's gonna have 3 points. But this is how the Katsuage hook is designed. Traditionally, normal hooks are gonna look more like a J with the barb inside, right? So one of the big, and I know you probably heard me a little quieter there, so just bear with me. I know one of the big things with the Katsuage hooks is that they are very, very thin wire, right? So when I set up my jerkbait, and I'll get into my jerkbait setup a little bit later, more specifically what I like to do with my line, my reel, my rod, how I like to fight the fish. One of the main arguments for people not liking the Katsuage hooks, the Megabass hooks, is that it's a very thin gauge hook, right? And my main argument or opinion to that is that if you know how to fight a fish, right, you know how to fight the fish correctly, you're going to land the fish. So I have catching fish here, losing fish here. So if you're catching fish, you must be doing something, correctly. You have the right equipment, you're fighting the fish correctly, and you have those skills to catch that fish. If you're losing fish, you are not fighting the fish correctly. You might have the wrong line. You might not be fighting the fish correctly. Now, of course, there are outliers in every single, piece of data set or whatever scientific research you're doing, right? So there's always outliers. I've gotten a couple hooks out of the package that are just totally trash, right? You'll take them out and you can bend them with your, just push on them and they'll bend straight out. I've had shaky heads do that. I've had Texas rig hooks do that. I've had a few spear point hooks, which I absolutely love, right? I've had some of these just be total trash. Maybe they heated up the machines too hot, maybe too cool, and it made the hook not correct, essentially, how it was supposed to be made. So one of the biggest things, again, the gauge of the hook scares a lot of people. I love power finesse fishing, putting my thin gauge hooks, smaller baits into tight little corners, nooks, and crannies where I have a high chance and a high probability of getting caught up. But I still choose to do it because I know correctly, or in my opinion correctly, on how to fight the fish correctly, and it gets in the boat. So, me using a size 2 or size 3 GP finesse hook by Spearpoint has landed me several 8 and 9 class fish, as well as 7, 6s, 5, 4, 3s, 2, whatever, right? So I am easily landing all these fish on these smaller gauge hooks, including the jerk baits, like I said. And I will even take these Katsuage hooks out of the package, right, out of a stock package, or I'll take them off jerk baits, put them on crankbaits. I'll put them on little finesse line through swim baits from the the 6-inch treble heads. That's just one of the main concerns from a lot of people is, having that hook gauge, it's going to bend out on them. Now, are there situations where you really need a thicker gauge hook? There probably are, right? If you're fishing around grass, you definitely might want to have that. But really, it's such an outlier. You only have 1 or 2 situations where you really need that. Like I said, I'm fishing very, very thick cover here in Texas. A lot of it, most of the time, is not around grass. I get that. And secondly, I have so many things to get snagged on, and I have gotten snagged in a couple situations. And another opinion of mine on why I like the Katsuage hooks is I can absolutely just straight bend these out on a piece of cover. Now, if my bill gets stuck, there's not much I can do other than try and poke it out with a stick, with my rod tip, or with a lure knocker or something. But if I get a hook stuck in a piece of rope or something like that, usually my 12-pound line or 10-pound line even can pull that hook out, and I can get my $20, $25 jerkbait back, right? That's just another reason why I love the Katsuage hooks. Now, one of the things that Wolverine said to me was that he does not enjoy the out barb part of the hook. Now, from a physics standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, right? Because the fish's mouth is going to be inside the reservoir of the hook. Now, as that fish tries to get out, it makes a lot of sense for an in-barb point to stop that fish from coming out, because their mouth is actually enclosed on that. Now, one of the arguments, for the out-barb treble is that it will do the exact same thing just on the outside. So, realistically speaking and holistically speaking, as long as your barb gets through that hook, or as long as that barb gets through the fish's mouth, right, it shouldn't come off either way. Because as that, like I said here, I guess I'll show you, right? We'll just take a normal hook, for example, real quick, and I'll show you kind of how my thinking is behind this. So this is just a normal in-barb treble hook. We've got a piece of paper here. I'm going to put that paper on the hook here, right? So as that fish pulls against the hook, let's assume it's literally going straight out the hook, perpendicular to it, right? It shouldn't matter either way, whichever side that treble hook is on, it shouldn't, or whichever side that barb is on, it shouldn't matter if it was in or out, it should still be stopping that fish. So I don't think the argument behind having an in barb versus an out barb really makes any difference on how much you keep the fish pinned. I think it's really the science behind how you fight the fish, if you know how that fish is going to move, and it's a lot of experience. You know, I haven't really thrown a jerkbait for super long in my fishing career, right? A jerkbait, especially with live scope, is pretty new to me. You know, I've only been doing it for around 3 to 4 years, but I have thrown the jerkbait for around 8 or 9 years when I really got exposed to it. Now, let me preface again, if you don't know my backstory, go watch or listen to the Scales and Tails podcast with Adrian over there, and I talk about kind of how I got started in the industry, kind of started how I started fishing, and it's a great episode to go on. And Adrian, if you're watching or listening, make sure to get me on here pretty soon. We got some cool stuff coming down the pipe for you. But you know, the jerkbait to me, anything with treble hooks, there's always a higher chance most of the time, of a fish shaking your lure off. Now, one other opinion of mine is that I like the bend in this Katsuage hook. Now, this bend here is a little bit similar, almost kind of similar to something like an EWG, but it's also kind of similar to something like a spear point, right? It has a V reservoir as opposed to a round bend reservoir. So really the 3 types of hooks. You got a round bend, you got the Katsuage, you've got an EWG, which kind of can't really draw here. It's going to go down on the hook shank, and then it's going to bend real sharp, and then it's going to have more of an angle tapered inwards to keep that fish really trapped. And you know, a lot of the hooks that I picked out here are going to be more towards that EWG style, because that's kind of what I like on some of my deeper diving crankbaits. It's going to keep them pinned. When the fish has a very heavy lure to try and shake around, that EWG is really just going to embed itself back into the fish. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. But you know, I enjoy the kind of in-between setup of the Katsuage hook, which allows me to still have a very good reservoir for that fish to stay pinned. And it also has a little bit taller point on it compared to most. So I'm going to bring out one of my favorite hooks that we got in, and this is the Spear 71 SS from BKK. And I highly recommend you to try these on your crankbaits, especially in the wintertime when those fish are kind of either one, slapping at your bait really hard, or absolutely gobbling it down. If I can get them out here. Man, I'm struggling with this. It will not come out. Sorry guys, I might have to cut the video here. There we go. I got them out. Sorry about that. Also guys, I'm not trying to cut my videos or anything. Even if I do mess up, if it's a really bad mess up, I'll cut it out. But I'm really just trying to give you the most honest opinion of mine in each video. Especially with the podcast, I didn't edit any of it, and it's going to be up very, very soon, if not already posted. So this one here is going to be a BKK. This one here is the Katsuage. It might be easier just for me to draw them, but the hook point on the Katsuage is actually a lot taller. Not really a lot. I mean, it's a couple millimeters taller than like a short shank EWG. Now this is a size 8. I like the size 8 going downsizing on my jerkbaits in the wintertime, because it's going to help that jerkbait actually slow float and get those fish to react and come off the bottom or brush pile or whatever they're sitting on, and help me catch more fish in the wintertime. So, you know, if you are fishing a jerkbait in the winter, I like to have a slow float jerkbait, especially if it's open water or around certain types of cover. If I'm targeting fish and need it to get down, I will weight it down. But there's also better options like a swim bait or an A-rig or something like that, where I can actually just actively sink it instead of trying to make them react. So actually, let's go with these. This here is the G Finesse. This is the one that has Aaron Martin's on it, tournament grade wire, TGW wire on it. It's also a size 6. So the stock hooks out of the package from Megabass are going to be size 6 trebles. Now this one here, as you can see, it is it's almost about the same. It might be just a hair shorter when it comes to the length right here on the upward when it goes around the J, right? It might be just a little bit shorter. It's definitely thicker wire. And again, back to the reason why I like the thin wire, it punctures the fish's mouth a whole lot easier. Now, I find a lot of people, when they are picking out a jerkbait rod, they either pick one out that's really, really, really stiff or really, really, really wet and noodly, right? And there's strengths to each depending on the water that you fish and how you work your jerkbait, because it all marries up with the rod and the reel and the line. So back to this G-Finesse one, I really like it. It's more of a short shank. It's not an EWG, but it is a short shank, very strong hook. I do like these on crankbaits when the fish are slapping at it, because EWGs tend to turn in just a little bit. This one here stays very true and parallel with the hook shank. So this one here, I do enjoy it, especially on crankbaits. If they're slapping at my jerkbait, I put these on. These are a little bit heavier than the Katsuage, just a little bit. So it's normally jerkbaits, especially 110s, are going to be very, very, very slow floats out of the box, right? So if you upgrade, it might turn into a extremely slow sink. So just be wary of that when you are jerkbait fishing. What was I saying? Shoot, the hook gauge, right? So the hook gauge on the Katsuage hooks, very, very thin, penetrates the hook, the fish's mouth very, very easily if you do it right. We're going to talk about rods real quick. That's what I'm deciding to do. I'm kind of all over the place, guys. I've got my coffee right next to me. This is probably my third or fourth cup today. And I mean like full mug. So we're just getting started. But rod length, guys. Rod length and action and taper and all that other stuff. If you haven't watched that video on rod powers, actions, and tapers, definitely give that one a watch. You know, typical rods, let's just say a 7-foot medium heavy from Lew's is going to be a lot of backbone and a little bit of tip, right? You're going to have most of the bend in the tip in this section here. It might load and it's still going to be pretty stiff all the way through the rod. Now, my typical jerkbait rod that I do like to throw is more of a medium heavy, very moderate action. I like to have a medium heavy rod that bends all the way through. Not all the way through, but let's just assume this is around halfway and I've got a good parabolic bend from there. And I hope you can pick it up on the camera. If not, I'll just kind of overlay some stuff. Let me double check that. That might be easier for y'all. So I do like a medium heavy moderate rod, something that has enough backbone, so medium heavy, and I like a moderate bend in my rod because I do like to have the ability for that rod to load up. Of course, these are very thin gauge hooks compared to most, so I need to have that flexibility in the rod if that fish wants to make a dig, if it wants to make a jump, and typically I'm going to have an 8. That was a terrible 8, guys. That was, I don't know what that was. Typically, I like to have an 8-speed reel on my jerkbaits. So, one of the big things with jerkbaits and topwater, a lot of people get this wrong a lot of the time, is that with a topwater, typically you're going to be bringing up the slack with the reel at the same time as the twitch. A jerkbait, and Tactical Bassin does a wonderful job of that, of a video explaining fall jerkbaiting or winter jerkbaiting, is that when you go to jerk your jerkbait, right, with your rod, you need to hit it, reel up a little bit of slack. You need to have a little bit of slack in your line when you hit that jerkbait, because it's going to allow you to fish that jerkbait a lot slower in a way, where it's going to turn left and right kind of like a spook does, and it's able to sit in one place and effectively stay in the strike zone a lot longer. When you hit the reel and the rod at the same time, you're going to pull that jerkbait farther and farther and farther away from that fish, especially if you do have some keying in on you. You really need to have the slack in your line, and that's what a moderate rod allows you to do. Typically, my rod length, I sit between a 6'8" and a really like a 6'11", which, you know, arguably the difference between a 6'11" and like a 7-foot rod between different companies is basically the same. So for simplicity's sake, let's just say 6'8" to 7 foot is where I'm very comfortable. I know Tim has some 6'10s. I know he's thrown 7 foots. He even throws, he actually likes to throw spinning rods on his jerkbaits, which are very, special to him. I know Blaukit likes throwing a jerkbait on a spinning rod, and there are some major advantages to throwing a jerkbait on the spinning rod with braid to fluorocarbon leader, or just straight fluorocarbon. Whichever way you do that, just marry your rod however you need to. I want to make sure I have a fast enough reel retrieve to where I can catch up to fish. If they run at me, I need to have that fast enough retrieve to keep them inside. Right? Stay with me. Stay inside the J of the hook. So having that fast gear ratio allows me to keep up with that fish, allows me to play it really well. If I need to, typically, right now especially, I am running specifically here the Corrado MGL 70. Actually just had that right next to me. We filmed the Backlash podcast a little bit ago, and that reel happened to be right there. So the Corrado 70 MGL has been wonderful for me. The Daiwa Tatula 70 has been absolutely wonderful as well. I also have some JDM reels like the Alphas, which I absolutely love for jerkbaiting. Another great one would just be like a SLX 70 MGL. The MGL reels just cast really, really nicely, and the weight transfer system in the 110. Really, most jerkbaits nowadays are very, very advanced, where you can throw them much longer distances than you used to. So making sure you have the right reel. It doesn't have to be an 8-speed. Again, this is just my opinion, my experiences. 8-speed has been the best speed I have found. I've thrown 7 speeds. I've thrown 6 speeds. I've even thrown PGs, which are like 5 speeds, essentially. I can't stand them. You need to have, my opinion, you need to have the capability to catch up to that fish. You can always slow down. It's harder to speed up with something like a 6-speed reel, right? So a 6'8" to 7 foot. 6'8" allows you enough length for that fish to make really big surges, and it's going to allow your rod to load all the way through. 7 foot is going to be on the longer side. Really, I think longer the better, as long as you're getting the good quality jerks on the rod that imparts the action on the bait, right? So 6'8" to 7 foot is generally where I like to stay. A medium heavy, moderate rod, not medium heavy. I guess I would actually classify it technically. If I were to actually classify it as something, I would do a medium heavy, or medium heavy medium, if you guys get what I'm saying, right? Where it's got enough backbone where you can snap that jerkbait really well, but enough moderate action to where it bends throughout the rod. So you don't need to have a super fast tip, but the taper needs to extend down at least halfway into the rod here. So some other hooks that I've been experimenting with here are the Pierce treble hooks by Ryugi. Now these have the TC coat, which is just going to be like that Teflon coat. These here are also very thin wire. This is the 6 size. They come in a pack of 6, I believe, and these here are very sticky sharp. They're not quite EWGs. They're very similar to the G Finesse. A little bit bigger footprint on them, but thinner wire. So they weigh about the same as the G Finesse. But like I said, it's a thinner wire. You're going to have to know how to fight the fish with these hooks here. You can't just slap them on and expect that they're going to catch fish for you, because they're not. I was experimenting with the size 2s, I believe, are in an armor joint, and they are much thinner wire than I actually thought they were. When you size up the hook, the wire generally stays about the same thickness, and that's what I enjoy in these here. I think for bigger crankbaits like a 5XD, 6XD, it's going to be perfect, especially in the summertime when those fish have really gummy mouths and I need to have that thin gauge hook go through their lip. These are going to be a huge player. I think I can get them to work for the armor joint here. I may have gotten one bad hook where, I could take my hand and turn that hook all the way around. So I think it might have just been just one of those hooks, because I only had an issue with one. Another thing you can do to not lose as many fish in the wintertime, and I've said this to a lot of people, right? Single hooks are going to allow you to have the best hookup ratio and hookup to land ratio most of the time, right? So maybe not hookup ratio. Let me take that back. Let me retract that. The hookup and land ratio is what should go up, right? So at treble hooks, if you throw treble hooks a lot, especially with the jerk bait, with 3 hooks, right, or just normal crankbaits, a lot of the times those fish will slap at your jerk bait. Maybe get, 1 hook outside the mouth, 1 hook like in their back, maybe 1 hook, the center hook in their mouth, the other one's going out every other place. A lot of the times that can work against you because the fish will eventually get leverage on your bait if they have it a certain way and pull out, rotate that bait where those hooks are going around to make that bait twist and pop out very, very easily. So treble hooks, to me, since they can grab so many different ways, left, right, a lot of the times I'll actually heat shrink, put tiny pieces of heat shrink on my hook shank to stop them from rotating so much when that fish gets it, right? I want to make sure all the hooks are pretty in line when they get hooked, mainly just because when you allow a lot of twist in there, it can cause issues. It causes a lot of torque, unnecessary torque on the hook shank, which turns the hooks and pops the barbs out, pops the hook, pops the fish off the hook. Like I said, I'm like jazzed on coffee right now, so I apologize. But I've experimented a lot with the Spearpoint size 2 GP finesse hooks on the jerkbait. I have had a ton of success with it. You will have to weight the bait just a little bit. 1 strip of the suspend strips or a couple suspend dots will get it to work perfectly. And these hooks, when you do switch from trebles to singles, you're going to notice you can fight the fish a whole lot harder. You can reel them in, wrench them in most of the time, boat flip them. I've boat flipped several 5 to 6 pound class fish with these GP Finesse number 2s. Same thing with the number 3s. A lot of people don't do it. A lot of people are, I guess, scared of it in a way, where, of course, your hookup ratio is going to be a whole lot better with 9 points on your bait. Hookup to land ratio might go down a little bit. Again, just my opinion here. But I've caught several fish using single hooks on my jerk baits from time to time. In the winter, especially if I do notice those fish are getting it really, really awkwardly. And you'll notice time to time, whether you're bank fishing or boat fishing, it just happens. Some days it might be a post-fronty day. It might be very high barometric pressure. You never know. So having all these options, and hopefully you're stayed on this video here to kind of get some knowledge from myself, from other people that I've learned these techniques from. And some of these hooks here, I keep them in my boat all the time. I've got G Finesse sitting in the back. I've got just the regular Gamakatsu short shank EWGs. I absolutely love these. Very, very strong. I mean, you don't have to fight a fish really with these hooks. They're so thick. It's an EWG. They're not coming off. But when it comes to using these Kaituage hooks, these are my recommendations. 8-speed reel, 6'8" to 7-foot rod. Make it a medium heavy or a medium heavy medium with a moderate taper, moderate action, and you should be pretty good. Now, of course, when the fish gets to the boat, that is the highest area, the highest percentage area where you're going to lose those fish. When you get them right next to the boat, they either dig straight down or they do some weird somersaults, bring their head up and they shake. A lot of different things can happen, and really just time on the water is the best way to determine what they're going to do, the correct movements to mitigate that, and it should help you not lose fish, right? So when I go out, one of the biggest things, like I said, is when the fish comes up, mouth straight up at the boat, because it's digging, comes straight up, mouth wide open, and starts to shake left and right and does that weird like backwards somersault thing. One of the biggest things that I can do to prevent that fish from coming off with my rod is to put my rod tip closer, not all the way to the water, but closer to the water, tilt my rod right. Let me grab a rod here, actually, sorry. Because it's so hard to explain. Just sitting here, I'm going to be doing some wintertime fishing videos, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. But so normally, right, you're fighting the fish either not quite straight up. I don't like straight up most of the time because you have a high leverage point, and it pops the hooks out. So typically I'm fighting the fish near a 30-degree angle or a straight 90-degree angle with a lot of bend in my rod. So if you think about it this way, right, as the fish is coming towards you, you're like this. When the fish comes straight up, and I want to mitigate that fish from jumping as much as possible, getting its head up and shaking really hard, because that bait, it does weigh around half an ounce, maybe a little bit more depending on what bait you have. I am going to turn my rod tip down like this and keep that fish's head from coming all the way up and shaking very violently. And I'm going to pull as tight as I think I can to make sure that fish doesn't get its head all the way up and start shaking. So I'm going to turn my rod tip down, pull as hard as I can to one side, whether it's to the left or to the right. So if that fish is looking, coming straight up right here, turning my rod tip down, and if I'm already on this side of the fish, I'm going to the right. I'm reeling really tight to the right. Or if I'm on this side and it's coming up, I'm turning my rod tip down and reeling as hard as I can to the left, which is, I guess, your right technically. So I think you get what I'm saying. You want to make sure that fish doesn't get its head up to shake. Another good one is when they make surges down, straight down under the boat or straight down at the bank. I see a lot of people not either one, use their drag, or two, not, I guess, take the correct action for that. They either try to do too much or they don't do anything. So not doing anything, not having your drag set correctly. Now, for me personally, I don't use drag when I'm fighting a fish. Bait casters have come such a long way from like the old bantam era or, older style reels where their drag was not reliable, right? I still don't really, it's not so much as a trust thing. It's more of I guess it's kind of more of a trust thing. I feel like, in my opinion, I have more control when I thumb the spool, so that's what I like to do. And I like to have my drag. I don't like messing with my drag, so all of them are basically locked down to the point where I can't really turn it anymore very easily. So it's all the way down most of the time. It allows me to get a good hook set into the fish. My drag's not going to slip when I set the hook. And when that fish starts digging down, right? So here's the situation. That fish comes up somewhere a little bit farther away from me and wants to make a straight run either down or out if you're on the bank, right? Because they can't really go straight down in shallower water from the bank. But if they try to make a huge surge out or down if you're in the boat, I like to thumb the reel. And I like to pull either just like with the with them coming straight up, right? When they go straight down, I want to make sure that whichever way that fish is going. So let's say it's running straight away from me, right? I'm going to slightly increase the angle of my rod, allow the taper to help out here. It's going to load for me. I'm not pulling my rod straight up at a 90. It's not even at a 45 even, maybe a 45, maybe a little less, right? So I'm going to have that angle, have that taper, allow my rod to do the work for me, thumb it to where I think just near that breaking point, right? A lot of the times there's not too much you can do, but there are ways to prevent how that fish moves. So whether it's running straight away from me, usually having it straight up and going to the left or going to the right is going to help you keep that fish pinned. If it does run, it's straight up, if you're on a boat, right, and it runs straight down and to the left, I'm going to be going with it to the left. A lot of the times people pull against the fish with light line. I like to use 8, 10, and 12 pound line. 12 pound I don't have as many issues with as 8 and 10, but again, it's all dependent on what rod I'm throwing. Always have that 8-speed reel. So if that fish is diving straight down and going to the left, I am going to reel as fast as I can, pick up slack, get the load, and let it out by thumbing the spool and following that fish to the left. When you pull to the right against a fish, if you pull the opposite way, you're almost mitigating a lot of what that rod is trying to do. You're putting it to the max capacity is what I like to say on that rod. If it's going the other way, do the same thing. Follow it. You don't want to pull too hard against it. You're already using light line. If you're still using stock hooks, there will become issues if you put it too far past its limits. It's either breaking capacity or something like that. So that's kind of the two main situations that I find when I am fighting fish. What they can do on the boat or on the shore, either go straight up at you or go straight down. Those are the two most dangerous situations I found myself in. And that's kind of what I got. Jerk baits for me, especially when it comes to changing the hooks out. Like I said, I don't do it much, but jerkbaits are a whole lot of fun in the wintertime, fall time, springtime even. You know, I've found jerkbait bites in the summertime where a lot of people aren't having success on them. A lot of people will burn down the bank, not slow down with a jerkbait, because in the summertime, yes, they have to eat, their metabolisms are up, but with a jerkbait, it's such a, I guess, almost subtle bait. You know, it's a subtle profile, and you can fish it subtly, but you can also fish it extremely fast and aggressive, just like a crankbait. And, you know, just the side-to-side action, you know, it's a jerkbait. It's a reaction bait most of the time, more than a hunger bite. It can be super deadly in the summertime as well. So I've committed a lot of the past couple of years really fishing the 110, fishing the Jackal re-ranges. You know, even the Strike King 300s, the brand new Rapala Mavericks are super, super awesome. They very well imitate the unique action out of a 110. You know, the 110 for me is a very finesse jerkbait. The 110+1 is also very finessey. You don't have to hit them that hard, and that's also another point for this. With the 110, you don't really want to hit it hard at all. I really just use a lot of wrist movement, and if you notice in people's videos, like Milliken, I know he uses a provoke, but you can do the same thing with the provoke. It's very unique in that way where you can do both. You can really hit it, or you can just barely work it. I really just use wrist movement. People that are proficient in jerkbait fishing know how to use their wrist primarily as a way of working the bait, right? So when you get out there, guys, really just try to use your wrist. It's going to hurt for a little bit. I get that. But in the long run, instead of putting a ton of action into the rod with your whole arm, which it might feel more comfortable, it might feel a lot better to you, you're moving that jerkbait a whole lot, you know, you're moving that jerkbait a whole lot. Too far for that fish most of the time. Really, when you slow down, what I've learned with Live Scope is that this really hits home. When you just jerk with your wrist like this, you get a whole lot more action out of the bait. So I really hope this video helped y'all. To Wolverine out there, when you watch this video, I mean you no harm, dude. Like, I have nothing against you. Just some of the things you said to me through private chat, right? Because he did DM me. Just some of the stuff there kind of got on my nerves, right? It's your opinions. I respect your opinions. You do not respect my opinion. And, this kind of prompted the whole video here. So I hope everyone enjoyed the video, especially Wolverine. This is kind of my thoughts and my takes on the jerkbait and why I like to use the 110 stock hooks. And here are some options like you recommended. So here's your credit. He recommended me to say, here's some other hooks to try out. So here's your credit, Wolverine. You said I probably wouldn't give you credit, but here you go. Here's your credit. Again, like I said, the Pierce by Ryugi, EWG short shank, Spear 71 SS's, and the G Finesse are probably my top ones that we have in store here. Now, you'll probably DM me and say, now this is specifically to you, you will probably DM me and say, why don't you have XYZ hooks in here? I've already explained we don't have $2 million to carry every single thing in the fishing industry, which $2 million might not even cover it, right? Like a Tackle Warehouse or Fish USA, whatever. But this is what we got. So these are my options that I can promote here. I'm not going to promote baits that we don't have here because that would just be very poor marketing on my point and a waste of my time and my boss's dollars going to me to work here, right? So that's kind of what I got, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more cool stuff. Backlash podcast should already be up, I think, by the time this video goes live. So I hope you enjoy the Backlash podcast as well, and we will see you next time at Lake Pro Tackle. Thanks for watching, guys.